There we go. Okay. Okay. I'm going to start in just a minute, everyone. Give it one more minute because I sent out some last minute emails to people with the link. Make sure they're connected with us. Oh, we have. Okay. Got your message, Nason. Got to figure out how to do that. I'll download. I see you can attach a file. So see if we can do that. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, it's a good idea. Oh, there we have it. Okay. Okay. Let's see if anyone else is coming on here. Okay, we're going to get started. So, speaker view. All right, Shavua Tov, everyone.
Tov.
Thank you all for coming on this very special event. I reached out to Rabbi Taylor about, I think, 2 or 3 months ago to set this up. I met Rabbi Taylor. I think we met for the first time at our annual conference, and I met Rabbi Taylor by the way of Rabbi Mati Flickstein, whose father is on the call. So that's very exciting. We had a great. We went on. We were having workshops at one location, and we drove to another we drove to Crown Heights from there, which was an hour drive. So he had to put up with me for an hour. But in that time, I got to know him, and I was quite fascinated by him. And he's a fascinating person who's accomplished a lot with his life, and continues to, and God willing, until 120. So when I saw he put out this is your second book, right?
Yes.
All right. I was hoping you were going to say, no, it's my fourth. But Mirz Hashem. In the
works.
You really have a gift. Yeah, you really have a gift and a talent. And Rabbi Taylor also has a fantastic YouTube channel as well. So what we're going to do is I'd like to ask Rabbi Taylor to just give us his background so we get to know who he is and a little bit about him and some of his accomplishments. I asked him to speak about those because I want everyone to benefit from them, to know about his 2 books and his YouTube channel and anything else I may not be mentioning. And then we're going to turn to our very gifted Gabbai Nason Russ. He's the other handsome guy on tonight, who's going to be moderating the conversation with Rabbi Taylor. Nason read his recent book, and is going to be asking him pointed questions so that we can get the most out of what we believe is of interest. And if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box. And at the end as well, we'll see if we can work out actual live questions if you want to do, if you'd like to do it that way as well. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Rabbi Taylor to give us an introduction so we get to know him a little bit, and then we'll turn over to Nason. Go ahead, Rabbi Taylor.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to the Newtown community for having me. Happy to be with you all tonight. My name is Pinchas Taylor. I'm from Plantation, Florida, born and raised, and currently. And when I was 15 years old, decided at the beginning of high school that I wanted to be a rabbi. The reason being is I liked spirituality, I liked people, I liked learning, and I liked teaching. So you stir that in a pot, rabbi seems like a pretty good fit. And then it was just a kind of a question of what kind of rabbi and that sort of thing. And through that sort of exploration, it ended up moving in the direction of Chabad. But for me personally, that was something that had a draw. Number one, because of the strong sense of tradition and spirituality, yet at the same time being something that was very engaged in the modern world. So it was kind of like, in my mind, for me, it felt like the best of all worlds. And so I went to study in yeshiva after following high school in Morristown. I was there for about 7 years and spent a little time in my last year in Los Angeles, finished up my rabbinic training there. And we've been back, my wife and I have been back in Plantation for the last 10 years. And down here, the main focus in the shul, in our synagogue, is through adult education, giving classes throughout the week. And then there are obviously a lot of outreach opportunities and whatnot that I'm connected with in our community. I'm a hospice chaplain as well throughout the course of the week, counseling families and hospice patients towards the end of life, and various other projects that I enjoy. Rabbi Weinstein mentions the YouTube channel. This is really just a fun way to reach a different type of audience, where we do interviews with celebrities and politicians and athletes and public figures in general. We've had a lot of interesting sort of exploration on these videos. Originally, the intent was sort of that it would be like a Bill Nye the Science Guy for religion or for Judaism, and it started off where my brother-in-law and I I was speaking in Las Vegas, and following the convention that was there, our flight back was for Sunday evening. The only 2 flights back to Florida were the early morning flight or the red-eye flight. So we took the red-eye flight. So we had the whole day Sunday. So we were thinking, what should we do? The shows weren't really our scene. The gambling wasn't really our scene. So we decided, you know what? Let's rent a car and we'll make a road trip to Area 51. It's about 3.5 hours from Las Vegas, just because there's a lot of, it's just an interesting, like, who does that kind of thing. And while we're on the road trip, we'll kind of record ourselves. And this was all kind of very impromptu sort of idea. We didn't have any equipment on us or anything. So we just sort of recorded the Jewish take on extraterrestrial life from our smartphones along the way. And when we got back home, he put all the footage together and made it into like a video, and we posted it. And see, just for fun, why not share the adventure with other people? And it got like 4,000 views in just a few days, and we were like, wow, this is kind of neat. People might be interested in this type of thing. So it became more of a regular thing of uploading either lessons from the synagogue on various topics, or sort of special things, interviews with notables, or certain little field trips to explain a Jewish idea in an interesting, outside the box type of way. And so that's sort of like the basic rundown of some of the things that I'm involved in at the moment.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi Taylor. Wow, I love that story about your first YouTube video. So yeah. I will just say that it's not 4,000 views is very impressive. It's not easy to put up a video that gets 4,000 views. I have a lot of videos on YouTube. I think one of them might have, I'm not even sure if it does, it might have 4,000 views, and that was over a few years. So that's actually really impressive. Beautiful. You should should have that success with many of your videos. I think I noticed some videos have far more views than that. Am I correct?
Yeah, some of them for one reason or another, just I don't know how the algorithm works, but if it hits the right way and it gets shared or whatever it is, some of them have upwards of 100,000. So it's nice.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the secret to the algorithm. The secret to the algorithm is the rabbi speaking. And also, what helps also is the title, the subject. But if you have those two together, you do well. So that says something about you.
Appreciate it.
Fantastic. So we're now gonna turn over to our moderator, Nason. Nason, I'm gonna spotlight you.
Okay.
There we
I'm
go.
unmuted.
Okay.
Okay.
And
So,
go ahead.
All right. So, Rabbi Taylor, you actually threw me a softball for my first question. So, thank you for that. In your book, there's a really interesting chapter on extraterrestrial life, Area 51.
Sure.
And whether it's possible, and is there non-human extraterrestrial life? Is it human extraterrestrial life? It's very interesting. And and I copied this from your book, in Tehillim 145, it talks about Hashem, your kingship is a kingship over all worlds plural. So can you talk a little bit about that, and especially since this is a Chabad event, what the Lubavitcher Rebbe said about the possibility of extraterrestrial life?
Sure. So the topic of extraterrestrial life is super interesting to myself, to a lot of people. You could see that based on the fact that there are mainstream there are mainstream TV segments about ancient aliens and all sorts of unsolved mysteries and whatnot. So there's a lot of ways to explore it, and the reason that motivates the interest, besides from the fact that it's kind of fascinating to look up in the sky and wonder if anyone's looking back at you, is sort of, are we alone, and would discovery of extraterrestrial life mean anything more in the way that I live my life? Would that kind of get me out of a box and be able to see the universe as a much bigger thing than I had prior to? They say that when Christopher Columbus set sail over the ocean and arrived in North America, that at the same time, or just after that, being that the Spanish Inquisition was right at the same time, that's when Kabbalah began to flourish in the world. And one of the reasons that you see this sort of synchronicity, that Columbus discovering the New World and Kabbalah starting very strong in Sas and in the land of Israel, is because his discovery of a new world, even within our world, opened people's minds to the idea that there could be more out there than their original box that they were kind of limited to. And so with that, the exploration of mysticism and whatnot was something that was able to grow and flourish around that same time. The reason that in the mainstream scientific community, the idea of extraterrestrial life, it seems to be almost a given amongst major mainstream scientists, is because if you accept the premise of evolution here on planet Earth, the next step is that, well, life in the universe certainly evolved in the same way. And if life in the universe, what's that sound?
Whoops.
If life in the universe sort of evolved, if life on Earth evolved the way that it did, then it must be that life in the universe evolved in a similar way. And if life in the universe evolved, then there must be planets out there, and there are many planets that are close enough to their star, the right distance and everything like that. There must be planets out there where life started evolving before it started evolving on planet Earth. So if it evolved in the same way, that must mean that there are people or entities out there, civilizations out there that started evolving maybe 1,000,000 years before they did here, maybe 1,000,000,000 years before they did here. And so the assumption is, in the mainstream scientific community, amongst a large segment, is that there certainly must be life out there because the statistics are just so impressive. The numbers are just so vast of how many planets there are that are within the right distance. The assumption is that there are 100 billion planets in the universe that are the proper distance from their star to house life. Just to give you an idea of how big that number is, that would be a 100 Earth-like planets, as far as distance is concerned, 100 Earth-like planets for every grain of sand on planet Earth. Just to give you an idea how big that number is. And so many in the scientific community say, well, with numbers that big, it makes sense that somewhere out there, there's gotta be some planet that has life on it, and some planet that may have advanced as far as civilization earlier than the Earth, and they would be therefore very ahead of us technologically. Again, this is all speculation. There's as of yet, unless anyone who is attending here today has actually broken into Area 51. There's a lack of tangible evidence, but as far as statistics are concerned, if you accept the premise of evolution on Earth and then accept the premise of evolution in the universe, well, it makes a lot of sense that there would be. As far as from Jewish tradition, the Jewish tradition is open to the idea of life outside of planet Earth. At the same time, life on planet Earth, in particular the human being, is unique. The human being, the Torah says that the human being is the being that has free will, that has free choice. And while there are many other beings out there that the Torah and Torah tradition discuss and are open to, the human being is the sole being with free will that can make moral decisions. That doesn't mean that all life out there potentially is like an animal that doesn't have free choice. The angels also don't have free choice. The angels spiritually are much higher than us, but they don't have free choice. So to say that there are a multitude of different types of angels in the spiritual world is no greater a novelty than saying that there can't be different types of species out there that have a certain advanced civilization. The only distinction would be that we are the only creatures that have free will. That's a basic premise in Torah, and that's something that and so with that, the part of the question was what's the Lubavitcher Rebbe's position on this. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe was encouraging Velvel Green, Dr. Green, who was working for the NASA's exobiology program, searching for extraterrestrial life. The Rebbe encouraged him to pursue that, to explore, and why, in other words, why limit God? Why just assume that there can't be life out there? Why not go explore? But at the same time, also emphasize this idea of free will, that the human being is the sole creature that has free will. You may find things out there. There may be other entities, who knows, right? It's certainly an interesting thing to think about. But as far as free will, we are the only free-willed being. And with that, that's kind of an interesting thing, the very special thing for us to think about, that in the whole universe, whether there's life out there or not, could be one way or the other, never know. The idea that we still remain the pinnacle, our deeds remain things that are transformative, not only to our own life, not only to our entire world, but to the universe at large.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I wanted to change directions, but maybe keep up in the stars. Okay. So recently, Rabbi and Rosie's daughter got engaged. So the first thing everyone says when they hear that is Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. And we obviously say that at auspicious times. Like you got a new job, Mazel Tov. Hey, daughter got engaged, Mazel Tov. And it's often translated as good fortune. But your book explains that the meaning of Mazel Tov actually is quite deep and actually relates to how the stars influence Jewish people, which when I first read it was like, wait, this is astrology? Wait a minute, what are we talking about here? So can you explain the Jewish perspective, how the stars influence us? What's the position of Hasidim on this? And how do you reconcile the influence of stars on us with the concept of free will? So there were a lot of questions embedded in there.
Sure.
But
so let's talk about them. Let's maybe see if we can do it all in one swoop. Okay, so the way that it kind of works, the way that when God is bestowing His bounty to the world, we have to go from infinite God to finite world, and so it's translating that energy of God, which is intangible, to a world that is tangible. So there's stages in between that sort of are able to make that energy palatable to a physical being. It's kind of like, if you think about it, it's kind of like when you want to bestow an intangible emotion on another person. So let's say you have a deep desire, a deep passionate love of another person. And so this is not really this emotion is not something quantifiable per se. This is like an intangible feeling. Now, if you want to express that to another person, there are different mechanisms that you can use. Well, at first you have to think of the idea that you want to do, but that could be through a hug, through a kiss, through a letter, through a gift, whatever it is, and that can, in some ways, make tangible this passionate emotion that you experience and translate it into a tangible form. And so when God bestows bounty on the world, our tradition teaches that there are sort of gradations that make this bounty tangible and be able to be manifest in the physical world. And one of the gradations along the way, besides the angels, is the stars. And not that the stars themselves have actual influence, but they sort of represent what is going on at a given time. In the same way that when your watch says 4 o'clock, that doesn't make it that it's 4 o'clock. The handles on the watch sort of represent what is taking place in the world, in the region of the world that you happen to be right now. So when you want to catch the train, you can look at your watch. It's not because your watch hit 4 o'clock that the train leaves, but the hands of the watch indicate to you things that are taking place at that particular time. And so the arrangements of the stars can be symbolic of a certain energy that is in the air, a certain, if you, for lack of a better term, a symbol of what is going on in the world where you're at that particular moment. Certain things that you can perhaps glean from, learn from. And that is something very much embedded in Jewish tradition. Now there's an area that we have to be careful about, because there are two primary reasons that people are into astrology. And first, I want to make a disclaimer that when we say astrology and when we talk about Jewish astrology, we're not talking about newspaper horoscopes, right? So it's not. I would hate that that somebody tomorrow or Monday would open up the Newtown newspaper and be like, well, the rabbi last night was talking about astrology, and so I'm going to look up my sign and see what today is going to bring. So there are two primary reasons why people are interested in astrology. Number one, to sort of find out a little bit more about themselves, right, their personality features and whatnot. And the second is about predicting the future. Well, if I'm this and the stars align in a certain way, I want to know how to operate, how to move forward, because through the stars I can sort of see what the future is going to bring. So that aspect of astrology, of sort of trying to predict the future is something that is forbidden for the Jewish community, because we're supposed to rely on Hashem, right? There's a verse in the Torah that says, "Tamim tihya im Hashem aleikecha," you shall be pure and earnest with the Lord your God, which means that our reliance is on Hashem. Imagine if I applied for a job and I'm supposed to find out next week if I got the job. So I could turn to a crystal ball, or I could turn to the stars to try and figure out, am I going to get this job or not? So if I see that I'm not going to get the job, or if that's what the stars tell me, well, I'm not going to pray to God about getting the job. And if I see that I am going to get the job, then I'm not going to pray to God because I see that I am going to get the job. So it kind of cuts God out of the picture. And so we have to rely on God, because our relationship with God is that's part of the actual relationship that we have, is recognizing God's hand in our lives in every which way that we live. And being that that's the case, to rely only on God as far as our support and predictions about any sort of future event. And that leads to one of the sub questions that you asked about, as far as where is the balance between what it says in the stars, either about your personality or about the future, and with free choice. So at the end of the day, we always have to remember this, and this is the example that I use. We have to remember that when we talk about things like astrology or your genetics or whatever it is that is influencing you as an individual, there are many layers that make you, and there are many layers that influence who you are. That can be your genetics, your nature. That could be the environment you grew up in, your nurture. That could be the stars you were born under, right? Your mazel. All of these things play a factor in shaping your personality. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that it's almost impossible to scientifically test out astrology, because if you're going to measure somebody's personality, say, well, I know this guy who's a Taurus, and he doesn't act like a Taurus, right? He was born in the Taurus month, and he doesn't act like one. Well, there are a lot of things that go into shaping your personality. It's not just your mazel. There are a lot of factors. And even within the realm of astrology, there are many factors. There's the month you were born in, there's the day of the week you were born in, there's the hour you were born in, all of which I go into in detail in the book. Now, when it comes to free will, just because the system was created a certain way doesn't mean that God can't change the system if we go to him, if we address him and we direct our attention to him specifically. Well, the system can be overridden. In fact, this is one of the things that Abraham, with our tradition, teaches an interesting story about Abraham. Abraham is told a few weeks ago, if you're following along in the Torah readings, that Abraham is told that he's going to give birth to a son, Isaac, and Abraham says, really? Like I'm so old. Like that doesn't seem to make any sense to him. So the Medrash, some of the explanatory texts that we have explain that Abraham actually had this sort of dialogue with God, and he says, Abraham happened to be a master astrologer. The Talmud says that the kings would come from other countries to learn from Abraham his astrological lessons. He was a master astrologer, and he saw in the stars, there's no child destined to me with Sarah. There's no child. He looked in the stars. He said, God, there's no child over there. And so God basically says, come outside. Come look at the stars with me. Come look outside. You see how Jupiter is over there? I'm going to move it over here now. In other words, who's in charge of the stars? Just because you didn't see it in the stars, you didn't see it in the program, doesn't mean that I can't override the system. I'm in charge over here. And so when it comes to free will, it works in a similar way. We may be predisposed to certain qualities. And again, not just through mazel, not just through our astrology, through our nature, through our nurture. We have a pull in different directions for various reasons. But that doesn't mean that at the end of the day, I have no say in what I do. And so a person can always say, my nature may be one way, but when it comes to this particular decision, or my nurture might be a certain way, I grew up a certain way, I can say, you know what, I'm going to rise above that. And we as individuals have the power, because we're given free choice. We have this power of God within us. We have also the ability to rise above what our predestined forecast would be, what our emotional traits that were embedded through various ways, what they are. We have the power to triumph over everything. The way that I like to think about it, just as on a final note on this topic, the way I like to think about it is, did you ever have a discrepancy, like when you're paying your phone bill or an airline ticket or whatever it is, and the bill comes in and it's, whoa, this is not what I expect. This is much more than I had agreed to. And you call up and they put you through to the customer service, and you say, my phone bill, I'm on the $50 a month plan. Why is my bill for $500? It doesn't make any sense. And they say, well, this, you know what, sir, this is the policy. This is how it is. You know, they'll explain it to you. And I'm sorry, sir, there's nothing I can do. I'm sorry, ma'am, there's nothing I can do. What's the first thing that any good Jew says to that customer service agent? Let me speak to your supervisor. And what's the idea behind that? The idea behind that is that the system might be a certain way, but if there's the supervisor who can either override the system or created the system, I'd like to speak to them. Excuse me, Mr. or Miss customer service agent, I'd like to speak to the supervisor. It's like the computer program doesn't do that. The computer program doesn't allow that. I want to talk to the computer programmer. And this is the lesson that Abraham taught us. Abraham said, I'm not destined to have children. There's no children in this in my destiny. I looked at the stars myself. I'm an expert. And God said, hello, I'm the supervisor over here. I'm the computer program over here. And so this is sort of how we reconcile the difference between what your fate is, quote unquote, with the idea of God overriding it. We can overpower these things through teshuva, through repentance. We can choose to overcome them through our free will. We have access to the computer programmer, to the ultimate supervisor in the universe.
Good, thank you. So you talked about how Mazel affects us as an individual, but I actually want to go broader and ask you about how the signs of the zodiac, which you also referred to, how they line up with the Jewish calendar, because that was also another surprising part for me. It's like they are quite interrelated. So can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Sure. So in the same way that we said that the signs, the stars, the constellations are symbols of what's going on sort of spiritually in the air, for lack of a better term, at that particular time. We use the example, remember, of the, it's like your watch. Your watch tells you kind of what the conditions are. It's like your calendar, like anything else. So when the page on your calendar is open to September, that doesn't make the leaves fall outside, but it's an indicator that the calendar that you have is an indicator of what's going on outside. So it's the same thing. The stars are indicators as to what's going on in the spiritual worlds. And so, for example, what God did was that he embedded in the stars and in the constellations and whatever zodiac sign is dominant for the month on the Hebrew calendar, that sort of embeds a certain message as to what the Jewish holiday is of that month, or what the energy is for that month. And I'll give you a few examples, okay? And if you want more examples, you got to get the book. So interestingly enough, on the Jewish calendar, the first month of the year is the month of Nisan, which is the month where Passover finds itself. And it's interesting that that's the first month of the year on the Jewish calendar, and the sign for Nisan is Aries, right? The ram or the lamb. And interestingly enough, in the secular zodiac calculations, the first zodiac sign is also Aries, interestingly enough. And it's also, right, the sign of the lamb, the sign of the ram. And what is taking place during Passover that would be connected with the lamb is the Passover sacrifice. Passover sacrifice, which was a key, like almost like the nucleus, the center of Passover observance. It marked the onset of Passover in the temple times. The lamb's blood. We think about what made the Exodus come to be, where they took the lamb's blood and they put it on their door. That's the symbol of Passover. So the Passover season in the month of Nisan is symbolized by Aries, which happens to be the lamb. What I'm saying, and what Jewish tradition is saying, is it doesn't just happen to be that way. The energy that's embedded in that time period is an indicator of what's going on spiritually at that time as well. I'll give you another example. The month of Tishrei, which is the month of all the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Simchas Torah, we just had it. And so the astrological sign, the constellation, the zodiac sign for that month is Libra. Libra, what's the sign for Libra? What does it look like? The scales of justice. And what's the reason the scales of justice? Because the whole month of Tishrei is about God's judgment, right? From Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, we are talking about being sealed, signed and sealed in the book of life. And then our tradition teaches that even until Hoshana Rabbah, even until the last day of Sukkot, God's judgment is still pending. And there can still be things that are changed. So the entire month, the theme is the scales of justice. Very interesting. And the month before Tishrei, by the way, the sign, the month before Tishrei is Elul, and the sign is Virgo, the Virgin. And the idea of the Virgin is a symbol of purity, and the idea of Elul, the month before Tishrei, is a sign of Teshuva, of we're trying to return to that place of innocence within us. We're trying to return to that place of purity within us. And so you'll find by each holiday, by each month or whatnot, you'll find the energy connected with that particular holiday or season or what's going on in the spiritual realms, if there are no holidays, that are found as indicators in the zodiac sign prevalent during that time, that is ascribed to that month.
So on Tuesday, I'll put you on the spot. On Tuesday was Rosh Chodesh Kislev, Sagittarius. So any insights on Kislev and Sagittarius, the archer?
So the bow has a bit to do with also the rainbow that was in the times of Noah. It also has to do with the light that comes out from the rainbow is indicative of the inner hidden light of Hanukkah. The book goes into it. I'd rather save all the excitement for the book no, in other words, I want to do it justice to give each month its proper assessment. There's a lot of footnotes and everything. Everything is sort of laid out over there. But I think you'll find it to be an interesting insight into the holidays and months and time periods that you may have never explored before.
Okay. A couple of minutes ago, you mentioned Teshuva, and you did something in your book, and we appreciate the previous commercial a second ago. Where you relate?
I'm just gonna put this right here. I'll talk behind it.
And by the way, I don't know if you saw, but Rabbi Weinstein posted the book review that was in the Jewish press a couple of weeks ago of the book review of the book.
Awesome, thank you.
So you talked about Teshuva, which obviously was relevant to a couple of months ago. But you related that to time travel and teleportation, which was something I did not see that coming. So can you talk a little bit about like time travel, teleportation, and Teshuva?
So Teshuva is really connected. Teshuva really is sort of like a spiritual time travel, if you will. And what I mean by that is, let's give an example. So when a person does something, let's say a person does something that maybe they shouldn't have done. So when a person does something that they shouldn't have done, there are outcomes. There are ripple effects that come out from that. And sometimes, the timeline that is created going forward from that instance where you maybe didn't do what you could have done or should have done, it creates a timeline that goes in a particular direction. There are ripple effects. There are results and consequences to that action. In particular, we're talking about here with things that you may have done against God, something that in the Torah that is a violation of something that God instructs us. That doesn't necessarily hurt anybody, any human, but is something that God instructed and we didn't necessarily live up to. So that creates a certain there's ripple effects, there's consequences to every action. So the timeline, let's call it, that is created from that event moving forward is one particular thing. If you would have acted differently, the outcomes, the results, the consequences of that would create a different timeline. And so what Teshuva is sort of going back to that original violation, that original sin or misdeed at that time, making it up with God, asking forgiveness, confessing about it, making it so that God forgives us. And then what ends up happening is that timeline, the results that have impacted you and impacted your world and whatnot, that have come as a result of that particular sin is erased, right? Because if we do Teshuva, then God wipes away the sin. So if that sin is erased, that means that the results, the ripple effects, the consequences of that sin, as far as we're concerned with God, are no more. And so it can create a different timeline. It's kind of like, if anyone remembers Back to the Future Part 2, right? Great movie, by the way, where they're in 2015, which was at that time the future, and Doc and Marty are there and they're visiting, and then Biff steals a sports almanac with all of the sports scores, and he steals their DeLorean, and he goes back in time to 1955 and gives himself, as a younger self, he gives him the almanac that has all the winning sports scores in it. And then when Doc and Marty go back to 1985, they've gone back to a completely different world because the timeline has been skewed. In other words, something changed back in time, and so it's created this sort of alternative timeline and the story ensues that they had to go back to 1955 and stop him from giving him the almanac so that the future turns out to be the way that they know it to be. But this is, if we look at our life and we look at the trajectory of the world as a timeline, Teshuva can play a very important impact. That when we repent of and return to who we really are and make amends with God for anything that we may have done, the sin is canceled out as if it never happened before. Many of the resulting consequences are also changed, and the timeline is certainly skewed and we are operating in a new timeline, a cleaner timeline where that sin never existed before. And so that's why I like to say that Teshuva is like a spiritual time travel, because it allows us to go back in time, for lack of a better term, spiritually, make that misdeed that we did had never existed before, and then the future that comes out from that is also something that's changed. The reason that we're able to do that, the reason that it is like spiritual time travel, is because when we connect ourselves with God, God is beyond time. In fact, God's proper name in the Torah, which is a Yud and a hey, with a vav and a hey, that is a conglomeration of the Hebrew words was, is, and always will be at the same time. Right? So God transcends time. God is beyond time. And so when we connect to God, who is beyond time, we can even affect the things in our past and correct them as well.
Nice, thank you. I want to switch gears and talk about angels and angels in Judaism. And I was struck by the idea of instances in Jewish literature and Jewish prayer where it seems that angels can actually, at least indirectly, be involved in our supplications to Hashem. And so it was just sort of an interesting idea about getting an angels involved. Can you involve an angel to intercede on your behalf up in heaven?
So the answer is, as most answers in Judaism are, yes and no.
Good. Okay, my next question. Yeah.
Right. So here's how it works. So angels are a tool, and we have to get our minds out of the vision that we have sometimes of angels. We think about angels sometimes the way that they're depicted in artwork, that the way they are on Hallmark cards, the way that they are in movies, as little winged babies that fly around with a harp and on clouds and with a halo and all of these things. An angel is an energy force. An angel is a mechanism. An angel, as we discussed earlier, is a means of transferring energy, divine unlimited energy and divine unlimited bounty, to be able to be experienced in a physical world. And so an angel is a pipeline that facilitates God's specific type of energy needed for a particular situation, that it should become manifest. So, for example, if you're praying for healing, the mechanism that God may use in fulfilling that healing from his endless infinite bounty is the mechanism of a particular angel that is called a healing angel. Again, this is not a separate entity. This is just a mechanism through which God fulfills a particular request, or can enter in the way in which God engages with us. So in Jewish tradition, you'll find sometimes instances where the text mentions angels specifically in prayers. There's a prayer in the bedtime Shema in some liturgies. In certain liturgy, there is a text that may Michael be at my right side, may Gabriel be at my left side, and it's sort of this invocation of angels. And in some liturgy you don't find that. You find every Friday night that we sing Shalom Aleichem to the angels who accompany us home from the synagogue. One is the positive force, one's a negative force. But what we say is that we even say Baruchuni LaShalom, right? Bless us, right? Bless me, angel. And so there are certain instances where it's mentioned, and instances where it's found in actual liturgy. You can certainly say the words that are a part of that liturgy. There's no question. If your custom is to sing Shalom Aleichem on Friday nights, which actively suggests not only welcoming the angels, but that the angel should bless you, that's something that you are certainly welcome and encouraged to do. As far as trying to make our own invocations and come up with our own formulas that may this particular angel, and name each angel by which force they are sort of in charge of or whatnot, I say let's just let God handle. In other words, let's pray to God, and whatever mechanisms God wants to use in making that come to fruition, God can decide what's the best mechanism. We don't have to say it has to come from, I only want it from the angel Gabriel, right? Gabriel. I only want, like, God will figure out what the best mechanism is in order to get the bounty to us in the most effective way. So as far as making our own liturgy or praying, certainly should not pray to angels directly. Even mentioning angels can be very problematic, because the way that we work in a very our brains work in a very funny way, that there's a very thin line sometimes between things that are acceptable and things that are unacceptable from a worship standpoint, from a Jewish theological standpoint. And so rather than get too close to that line, that border line, it's more advisable to just say, you know what, unless there's an actual liturgical text, a prayer written in the siddur that I'm using that mentions that, I'll just pray to God directly in the way that I know how, and God will facilitate the best angelic combination to satisfy or to fulfill that particular request.
Good. All right. So we've given the angels their due. Let's go to the other side. Okay. There's a lot in Judaism about demons and ghosts and evil spirits and things like that. So could you talk a little bit about that and what is their role, and how should we be thinking about the demons and the dark side?
Sure. So everything that exists in the human being on a microcosm exists in the world in a macrocosm. So if a person inside has an evil inclination, a temptation to do things that perhaps it shouldn't do, then in the world at large, there's also forces out there that as well will pull person in incorrect directions. There are that's sort of the way that it comes about. So the parallel to the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination within, is sort of demon. And again, we have to get our minds out of the way that we have read it in books, seen it in movies, artwork, or whatever. It's not little horned devil people with pitchforks and lava and goblins and anything like that. It is sort of the force in the external world, in the world at large, that pulls us in a direction away from God. The whole reason that we have an evil inclination, and that there is temptation or hindrance to doing good, is because God wants to create a world that has free will. In other words, the whole nucleus, the whole purpose of our creation here is that God puts us in a situation, creates us with free will, creates a world that seemingly obscures God completely. You look around, you can't see God in an open way, and gives us free will and allows us through our free will to find God in the creation that he's created. And with my free will and making the right decisions, as explained in the Torah, right, to choose one thing over the other, the way the Torah says to do it, as opposed to a different way, the way that I might want to do it instinctually, I've illuminated the world. I've revealed godliness in that particular situation in my life. And so the reason that there is a temptation within, the Yetzer Hara, or if you want to call it a demon, the idea is, in order so that we can have a balance of free will and be able to make proper choices. Imagine how great is the divine revelation that comes about when even the place that God created to conceal godliness reveals godliness. God creates a situation which in every way, shape, and form conceals godliness. And even there, through human free will, we have the ability to reveal godliness. So even in the place that was created to obscure godliness, to conceal godliness, reveals godliness. It's unbelievable. That's how we become a partner in creation. But that only becomes accessible and available if you have a moral choice, if you have free will, which would include having an inclination to do the wrong thing. So whether it's inside of us, the temptation to do what is against the Torah, or whether it's ideologies in the outside world that are tempting but are pushing us counter to Torah, these are the demonic forces that we're talking about. Again, it's not the way that we might think about it with horned little horn things that one goes on this shoulder and one goes on this shoulder, and that's those are just ways that it's represented in it's anthropomorphic terminology. It's just borrowed terms to describe something that's going on spiritually. Ghosts are a different entity. Ghosts are something that is a soul that, for one reason or another, and this is a very rare thing, and something that I'm not sure that we can even have exposure to. So if you saw one of those like unsolved mysteries, or from beyond the grave, or whatever it is, if you've seen those things where there's apparitions and then there's images and whatever, I'm not sure that is something that we can necessarily have access to. That's to be determined. I'm not sure. However, the premise is that this is a soul that, for one reason or another, that there is an element of that individual soul that sort of got locked into the physical world. That doesn't mean that their soul hasn't gone up. There are many aspects of the soul that part of the soul hasn't ascended, but sort of the external part of the soul, the shell of the soul, in some way, on rare occasion, can sort of get locked in the physical world. There are different books in our tradition, mystical books, that talk about the idea of after, for example, a traumatic event, something where the soul where there was sort of a confusion, and it was a very quick and unexpected situation where the person's life ended. And so it can be that for a little while, that the soul sort of remains, or an aspect of the soul, a trace of the soul sort of remains embedded even in the physical world, in that particular place or whatnot. So that ghosts are sort of a different thing from demons. Demons are not things that we need to be concerned about today, and I'll tell you why. It's part of the reason is because our spiritual level now is much lower than it used to be. So, God creates the world zeh le'umat zeh, one thing opposite the other. That as much good inclination as I have in me, that I have the same temptation towards the evil. Otherwise, it wouldn't be free will. If it's not an equal balance, it's not free will anymore. If I'm predisposed if I have more negative drive than I do positive, that's not free will anymore. I'm basically programmed to go in the wrong way. So it's always a balance. There's equal good and equal not good in the world. And so when we were in our earlier generations, when we were very spiritually up there, very, very, very highly spiritual beings that were capable of having things like prophecy, beings that were worthy of having open miracles, and God reveal himself on Mount Sinai, and God reveal himself, godliness reveal itself, in the temple, right? And the Ark of the Covenant, and all of the mystical, godly, spiritual experiences that the people were worthy of having back then. They also, again, because God creates a world that's zeh le'umat zeh, everything's balanced. And so on the other side of the coin, God creates spiritual forces that counter that. So you have things like black magic, or just magic that was something from back in the day, that was something that was a real thing, and a real fear, and a real concern, something that really worked. The Torah says itself about the Pharaoh's magicians, after Moses throws his staff on the floor and it becomes the serpent, that they do the same thing, and the same thing, they're able to duplicate the blood and the frogs, and that they are able to do it just through a a dark mechanism like black magic or magical processes. And so the only reason that that type of thing existed back then, magic and demons, is to balance all of the positive, the holy energy that we had access to as well, such as open miracles and prophecy. So once prophecy ended and open miracles, as the generations continued and our spiritual sensitivity became more and more calloused, which happens every generation, we're more and more calloused. The idea of demons being so involved in the world, like nowadays, is not something that we need to worry about, because again, our spiritual sensitivity in the realm of holiness is relatively limited. And so on the opposite scale, on the opposite side, in the realm of unholiness, we're also not tempted or pulled drastically in that direction in the same way, because again, if we don't have access to it in the realm of holiness, we also don't have the temptation in the realm of unholiness. So don't worry about the demons.
Okay. So we've talked about the angels and we've talked about the demons. So I want to come back to Earth.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm exhausted from the time travel. So generally accepted that maybe millions, billions, whatever years ago, all of the continents were one huge landmass that for whatever reason ripped and split apart and became the continents that we know today. And some of the theories in your book, it talks about continental drift theory and plate tectonics and the all of those things, meteors, etc., are actually alluded to or discussed in the Torah. So can you talk about places in the Torah that talk about significant changes in nature, even, I don't know, the Atlantis?
Sure. So Atlantis is always a fun topic. We are not sure. Historians, scientists are not really sure whether the place of Atlantis actually exists. I mean, the mainstream scientific or historical consensus is that it was not a place, it was not a real place, but perhaps that was based on something. It was maybe based on an actual place, and it sort of got embellished or whatever the case may be. From a Torah perspective, the continents were all together at one time at the beginning of creation, and there were various catastrophic events that drastically changed the topography, the geographical look of planet Earth. And some of those are described explicitly in the Torah, and some are discussed more in the commentaries and in Jewish tradition at large. So one of the places is that in the generation of Enosh, which was the generation, the grandson of Adam, like really towards the beginning of creation in the Torah's account, that because of the sins of his generation, when idolatry was introduced to the world, that God sort of sent a flood that engulfed 1/3 of all of the landmass. And so that's kind of the flood that nobody knows about. Nobody, at least from a plain reading of the Torah, that nobody's really heard about before, unless, as I'm sure many of you are, that people like the ones watching on Zoom tonight, who are studying the Torah on a regular basis, that this is in Rashi's commentary towards the beginning of the Torah, that this was a flood, again, a major catastrophic quick change that happened as a result of particular misdeeds in that generation. Obviously, we're all familiar with the flood of Noah and the great changes that were going on planet Earth at the time of Noah. One of the things that you'll notice, even sort of a cursory glance at the Torah, you notice that the world pre-flood and the world post-flood are almost two completely different worlds, if you will. The world of before the people have such longevity. The average age, you see the years like 900 years, 800 years, and our first reaction is, well, maybe they counted years differently, but that's not what the Torah says, and that's not what Jewish tradition teaches. And so one thing that you see right after the flood is that the age goes down to about how we know it today. It's a completely the 120 years is like the end of life. That's like the max that a human being can be. We see drastically that the numbers, nobody lives past 200 after the flood. And so that's a drastic change from the way that it was before the flood. That's for various reasons. That's for spiritual reasons, but also for physical reasons. The climate of the earth changed. The construct of the earth changed. The Medrash says that the earth before the flood was sort of like in a constant springtime, and all the continents were together, and everything like that, and as a result, the weather conditions weren't tough. It was easy. There was no disease. There was no nothing. All of the stuff that makes us age in the way that we do came after the flood. That was all stuff that was sort of new, and so the world changed drastically during that time, and also during right after the flood, we find another incident with the Tower of Babel, where you find that it's called in the Torah the Dar HaFlaga, which literally means the generation of dispersion. And there are views from our tradition that teach that perhaps it was during that time where the continents split, or where the continents became where they are as we know them today, or roughly so. What's most reasonable from a Torah perspective is that each step along the way, first the flood by Enosh, then the flood of Noah, then the generation of the Tower of Babel, that each one had these sort of catastrophic changes that the earth underwent, and from the time of creation, where all of the landmass was sort of one, and that it would be breaking apart and reshifting in the way that we sort of know it today, with plates colliding and whatnot. This was something that gradually happened over time, but from a Torah vantage point, it would be in very quick, catastrophic ways, as opposed to a slow, uniformitarian type of way. One of the reasons that scientists believe and calculate that the world is the age that it is, the millions, in fact, 4.5 billion years old, are for various reasons. One of the reasons is that they kind of measure the way that things are sort of changing now and sort of backtrack it to the past. So, in other words, if you take the Colorado River, and the Colorado River is eroding down in the Grand Canyon, let's say now 1 inch per year. Well, now, if the assumption is that the Colorado River was at the top of the Grand Canyon, and it has slowly eroded down, all the way down to where it is now, a mile, 2 miles, whatever it is, right? So if it's going now only an inch per year, so, well, if it was, in order to make this erosion all the way down, that must have been millions and millions of years, because if it's only going an inch right now, and let's assume every year it goes an inch, so then in order to get it back up the mile, or wherever we believe that it started, I have to sort of back calculate that. And so that's one of the ways geographically in which they calculate it to be so many years ago. So from a Torah vantage point, certain effects on the continents and the way in which they are sort of they look and are sort of distributed around the globe today was a result of sort of catastrophic changes that were going on in early Earth's history, from after the time of Adam. So as far as Atlantis per se, there's no specific legend of Atlantis per se, but as far as continents that have been submerged or have changed, that there was land out there yesterday, now there's no, right? There's a big flood, and now, so we can certainly see how there can be a tradition of a once large landmass that was swallowed up in an instant by a flood and never to be seen again. And that's perhaps where some of the Atlantis tales have sort of come from.
Okay. You talked about Noah and the flood. I actually want to go back to a parsha right before that, Voracious.
Okay.
And in your book, you talk about the location of Gan Eden, the location of the Garden of Eden. So on the off chance we get to travel soon, I may want to go there. So I want to know where I should book to. So talk to us a little bit about the location potentially of the Garden of Eden.
So the Garden of Eden was a physical place that actually met at, the Torah gives 4 distinct rivers, and we know what rivers those are. The only problem is that the way that the continents and the world is situated at the time, at this present time, those 4 rivers don't really intersect anymore. They're kind of like in the ocean, where they're covered in water. So as far as making travel plans to go there, I don't know that that's so much in the cards. The predominant idea is that Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, is something that is spiritual as well. There's a massive spiritual component there as well. In fact, the term Gan Eden, Garden of Eden, is used whether talking about the original Gan Eden, the garden, or the spiritual, the world of the souls. It's used interchangeably. So when we talk about the souls going to Gan Eden, going to the Garden of Eden, Jewish tradition sort of uses that term interchangeably, whether we're talking about the physical or the spiritual. It's not necessarily a place that can be hunted down nowadays. Like I said, as far as geographically, the where those 4 rivers would line up is underwater. But maybe if we got a scuba team, or maybe if there's any adventurers in the group tonight that want to go scuba diving and try to explore down below, maybe you'll find the remnants of the Garden of Eden, the physical Garden of Eden, when you're down there.
Okay. Rabbi Taylor has been talking a lot, and this is addressing everyone here. We've talked so far about angels and demons, extraterrestrial life, time travel, Teshuva, astrology, zodiac, cataclysm on the earth, Garden of Eden. And so I don't know if anyone has any questions for him. I've got a couple more. So I don't know if you want to raise your hand, or Rabbi Weinstein, you want to unmute people, or you can post them on the chat.
Yeah, I think everyone, you can unmute yourself if you have a question. I believe you should be able to.
Right. If you go down, if you move your mouse in the lower left, there's the mute button. At least on my computer, that's how it appears. So you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Do we have anyone with a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I put this in the chat, but it sounds like the Torah only talks about this world, creation, and things occurring on this world. So would you say there's other worlds and they would have their own Torah, or their own beginnings and everything?
Are you speaking in regards to like extraterrestrial life?
Yeah, well, you were saying there's probably, it goes without saying that there's probably life on other planets or other universes. So the Torah only speaks, I think, about this world and life on this world, people on this world.
Sure. So first of all, I just want to clarify that. Mike, maybe put it on mute again, just so it doesn't yeah, perfect. I just want to clarify that I'm not saying that I think that it's a given that there's life out there. I'm saying that many in the scientific community would believe that, based on, again, if you accept that evolution happened here randomly, and that was completely random, that it happened here, and there are Earth planets, or in other words, planets that are the proper distance from their star. If life evolved here, again, without any accidentally or whatever, it just happened to come about, then chances are that it happened somewhere else as well. So I'm not saying whether or not I think specifically that there is life out there or not. I'm just saying that would be why that would be why someone would think such a thing. The Torah, and this is something that the Rebbe also emphasized. The Torah, from a Jewish vantage point, the Torah is a blueprint of creation. The Torah is perfect. The Torah is truth. In fact, the quintessence of truth, the embodiment of truth. That's not only the incidents that happen in the Torah, but even the way that the letters are written, right? The order that the letters are written. It's kind of like on your computer, like a graphic user interface. If you ever opened up a picture file or a video file on your computer accidentally in Microsoft Word, what happens is that there's a bunch of just letters and symbols and zeros and ones and whatnot that is your picture, or that is the video file that you were trying to open, but this is just sort of the computer code that represents what that movie file would be. If you were playing it in the movie file, that's what it would be. So the Torah and the order of the letters in the Torah and everything about the Torah, from a traditional vantage point, is that it's perfect. It's absolute truth. It is the graphic user interface, the computer code of reality, of truth, of goodness, of godliness. And so the Torah is only needed for a being that has free will. Because if the angels don't need the Torah, they don't have free will. They don't need to be they don't have an inclination to do the wrong thing. They're angels. Animals don't need the Torah because animals are animals. They don't have free will. And so, being that one of the premises of life on another planet is that it doesn't have free will, so there wouldn't be a different Torah over there. There wouldn't be a need for a Torah. There wouldn't be, because there wouldn't be any free will with from those beings. Those beings wouldn't have a moral capacity to choose between right and wrong. So there wouldn't be like a different Torah for them. The Rebbe emphasizes the point as well that if the Torah is absolute truth, the quintessence of truth, in fact, then there can't be two truths, right? There's one truth. And so the way that the letters are written, and the way the order and everything, the whole computer code about this universe, the creation of heaven and earth, it starts off, it's not just about this world. Seemingly it is, because most of the instructions and whatnot is about things that you and I do on a daily basis. But when it comes to it, the Torah starts out in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Everything is under God's dominion. That means the Torah itself predates and is the blueprint of the entirety of creation, not just life on planet Earth.
Good. Others, you want to unmute yourself and questions again? Extraterrestrial life. Mike, did you get an answer to your question? Okay. Head nodding enthusiastically on mute. Okay, good. Okay. Very good.
Do the Kanevskis have a question? For some reason, your audio is not working properly, so the question is not coming through. Yeah.
That sounds like a demon.
Yeah. Kanevskis, I'm really sorry that your sound is verifying some of what Rabbi Taylor was talking about before.
Good. Other questions from people?
I was going to ask about the arts in this world of the Torah and the paranormal. Is there any intersection with the arts, with music, with fine arts, or dance? Is there some intersection that you've discovered or could share with us?
Certainly. So it's fascinating that that God put various gradations of pleasure into this world. Some are completely materialistic, like the pleasure that you get from eating a good hamburger, good kosher hamburger, obviously. And then there are more refined pleasures that a person can experience. And the more refined pleasures touch a deeper part within our soul. Music would be one of those things. Art would be one of those things. And in truth, all of the arts would be something along those lines, something that it takes a bit more sophistication to appreciate, but the depth to which a person appreciates it is much deeper. So you may, both myself and a cow can enjoy a hamburger because it's something very tangible, very physical. It doesn't take much sensitivity or spiritual or the like to enjoy it. It tastes good. But when it comes to things like music, or when it comes to things like art, a cow's not necessarily going to appreciate a Monet. It's a maybe a very sophisticated cow. The demon's coming in again. There we go. So with the more sophisticated pleasures that Hashem embedded into the world, there are certain spiritual there's a certain spiritual depth that each one can connect that we can connect to. Music is a tremendously spiritual entity or art form. And when there are works within Jewish literature that describe the sort of spiritual correlation, the spiritual world in the Sfirot, in Kabbalistic jargon, that you are sort of attaining, or that you are tapping into with each of the 7 notes in the music scale. Right? There's no coincidence that there's 7 notes on the music scale and also 7 emotional attributes within a person. And so music has very lofty spiritual potential. Well, that also means that we have to be perhaps careful about the music that we listen to, because being that it is spiritual, we want to connect our souls with holy places and holy songs and songs that were written and have content that is of a holy nature, as opposed to songs that don't. But certainly the appreciation that a person experiences, the pleasure, the more refined spiritual pleasure that you have through art, through the arts, through music, and the like, does certainly have a connection with the spiritual world. It's, in fact, that's one of the interesting things that were bestowed upon humanity. That isn't it interesting that there are certain pieces of music or works of art that almost universally you can look around and say, wow, that's just so moving, it's so incredible, it's so beautiful, or whatever it is, that sort of sophistication, that's the spiritual sensitivity, was something that was implanted in the human being. Yeah, so it certainly does play a role in our spiritual service, and we can utilize those things towards their godly intended purpose.
Thank you.
So were the Rebbe's niggins written according to the notes on the scale and the middos that they showed, the 7 emotional attributes?
So right. So I can't I have to be honest that even in secular music theory, my knowledge is minimal as far as how to compose my own masterpiece, my own symphony. It would be very limited. And so certainly the spiritual components of that would be as well. At the same time, if a tzaddik, if a righteous person who naturally has is spiritually attuned and sort of knows instinctually, spiritually instinctually, how the tune is supposed to go, you can be sure that a nigun from the Rebbe or a tzaddik, or a righteous person in general, is going to be something that is uplifting to the soul in a very practical way. How each note connects and why the combination was the way that it was, and why it gets faster and slower and higher and lower and whatever, that's perhaps something we can explore at a different time. But certainly the Rebbe's Nigunim and spiritual songs in general that were taught by the righteous, by our Rebbeim or other Rebbeim, Tzaddikim, righteous people in general, these have tremendous spiritual effects on our lives.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I don't know if we have any more questions for Rabbi Taylor. Again, I'll do this. Do this so you can see his book. There you go. I don't know if it comes backwards or not. All right. We'll talk later about my commission, Rabbi.
Sure.
Rabbi Weinstein, anything from you?
Yeah, well, one last call. I'm going to follow up, back up Nason's last call. Any last questions for Rabbi Taylor? Unmute yourself and ask. We'll give that 3 seconds.
Just one last question. And
Good.
we're using the word righteous here. And I've recently heard or read that righteous really refers to more so to justice than to personal holiness necessarily. I was wondering if there's a connection that you see righteousness and justice as being closer than we give it credit for today.
Right. I mean, the context I was using the word was mostly for universally accepted rebbes, rabbis, sages that teach a song to their constituents, or create a certain melody that we can assume that certainly has a spiritual elevation element to it. That's the sort of connotation that I was referring to when talking about the music.
Okay. Any last questions? All right, fantastic. So a big thank you, Rabbi Taylor, for sharing so much information with us tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a beautiful load of information, not an overload, but load, and very well explained. A big thank you, Nason, for moderating so wonderfully, and for really pulling out the most exciting points from Rabbi Taylor's book. So Rabbi Taylor, the book is available on Amazon. I think it was sold out. It's going to be back in available soon. Is that? Or
yeah, and if somebody wants to order it, they can order it directly from me as well. And I'll send you the link, and maybe you can send it out to everybody if they're interested. They can just it's a PayPal link, and if you just write for your book and your address is on there, I'll email it. I'll mail it to you directly.
Is there either a website or an email address you want to share where they can then find you, and this way they can directly get the information from you if they're interested?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest way is if you have Facebook, to just friend me on Facebook, or go to my Facebook page and make a message there. If you want to write down the link for the PayPal for the book, it would be paypal.me, like ME, / my name, Pinchas Taylor. And then when I see, and the cost is $36 to cover the shipping as well. It's 400 pages, it's hardcover, and I really think that if you're interested in this topic, that you will enjoy it and gain a lot of interesting insights that you may not have gotten anywhere else.
Excellent. So we're going to wrap up. Again, a big thank you. And I also want to share with everyone, if you can just give me one moment here. You may have noticed it in the email, but our next special event is going to be on December 24th. I just thought you might have nothing to do that night. So, we always had to do a movie night that night, and we're having a movie called The Rabbi Goes West. It's actually a really, it's really interesting. It's about a Chabad rabbi who moves. Whoa, one second here. It's about a Chabad rabbi who moves to Montana, and his interaction with a neo-Nazi who threatens him, his interaction with conservative and reform rabbis and how they feel about his moving there and direct exchanges with them. So it's interesting. And I happen to know this rabbi. I don't know Ravi Taylor if you know him, Rabbi Brook. He's a very dynamic and outspoken, a very colorful personality. He's a lot of fun. He has not confirmed 100%, but I'm hoping he will be on right after the movie for questions and answers. So that's actually going to be at 6 p.m. on Zoom, December 24th. So if you didn't sign up for that yet, just go back to the email I sent you with this link, and you'll see a link there to sign up. And lastly, I want to tell you also, we're having an unbelievable, the most popular course that I ever taught. It's a JLI course called Journey of the Soul. It's a 6-week series. We had 160 people attend last time we taught it, which was the largest attendance in all 400 JLI locations. And we're going to be, that course was actually even revised. It's an excellent course. It was revised even further to really make it even a better course. And we'll be teaching that beginning in January. So if you'd like to join us for that, you can sign up again. It's also at jewishacademy.info. You can find both of these events. Thanks for joining, everyone. Thank you, Rabbi Taylor. Thank you, Nason Russ. Have a wonderful week, everyone.
Thank you.